vs. Winter, Part 3. Chapter 1. The Final Game. The shadows in Elder's sanctuary were deeper than before, no longer merely the absence of light. Now they seemed to pulse with anticipation, the kind of stillness that settles before a storm. The vampire stood near the obsidian window, pale fingers clasped behind his back, long grey hair like silver threads caught in the candlelight. Winter sat cross-legged on the stone floor, her mask in his lap, staring into the flame of a single candle. His hoodie was dusted with ash, remnants from the last challenge. The wolves, the shed, the helpless children. "One each," Elder said, his voice thick with gravity. "You cost an entire army its victory. You saved a village without drawing blood. We are, it seems, equal." Winter's eyes flicked up. "Strange, isn't it? You had the first game, a test of strength, of strategy. I had the second, a test of restraint. But neither challenge was truly ours." Elder turned slowly. "Explain." "The armies were not mine. The villagers were not yours. They were backdrops, constructs, tests made to provoke us, not to define us." Elder arched a brow. "And yet, they did define us. You hesitated, and it cost thousands. I refused to intervene, and it spared the innocent. Both outcomes. Truthful." Winter nodded. "And both painful." They stood in silence for a long moment, the candle crackling between them. Then Elder spoke. "So, how do we break the tie? A final challenge, yes. But who writes it? Who decides what will reveal the victor?" Winter rose slowly, picking up the chrome mask. "If either of us chooses," he said, "the deck is stacked. Your nature would carve a crucible of cruelty. Mine might lean too far toward redemption." Elder chuckled. "So we are too biased, even to judge one another." Winter stepped closer, holding the mask, but not yet placing it on his face. "Then let reality choose." "Meaning?" "We give up control. No design, no plan, no setting of rules or scenes. We let existence itself present the next mirror, and we both step through it." Elder's face darkened. "You would leave it to fate?" Winter shook his head. "Not fate. Reality. It is the only judge not fooled by story, sympathy, or power." Elder turned his gaze back to the dark beyond the sanctuary walls. The wind howled faintly, as though the world itself were listening. "Very well," he said. "Let it be reality." Winter nodded once. "Close your eyes." Elder did. So did Winter, and in that moment, the world unraveled. Chapter 2. The Hunter and the Hunger. The fire crackled low in the hearth of Elder's cabin. Small, silent, far from any village. He stood alone, cloaked in dark leather and fur-lined armor, his hair now tied back, revealing a sharpness in his gaze, not seen since his wars of old. On the table before him lay a roll scroll, thick parchment, browned at the edges. He unfurled it slowly. A face stared back. Painted in ink and fear, the image bore a striking likeness to Winter, but distorted now, darker. The eyes were no longer thoughtful, but hollow, the mouth twisted in a grin that hinted at something more primal. At the top of the poster, "Wanted, dead, for the murders in Black Veil." Elder said nothing. Instead, he walked to the edge of the table and poured himself a drink. His reflection in the liquid shimmered, and for a moment he saw not himself, but Winter, fangs bared, crawling across the ceiling like a thing that should not be. He blinked, and the image was gone. Elsewhere, far from firelight, deep in an ancient stone castle nestled atop a ridge of craggy black rock, Winter opened his eyes. He lay in a vast bed, surrounded by silk sheets the color of dried blood. He did not breathe. He did not need to. Slowly he rose, bare feet touching the cold stone beneath him. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with hunger. It wasn't thirst, not quite. It was something beneath that, ancient and alive, a gnawing, a whisper that filled the marrow. Winter stepped toward the mirror. There was no reflection, only the room behind him, empty, still. He looked at his hands, turning them over. "Is this what it feels like?" he whispered. A noise outside, a heartbeat. Somewhere below, he could hear it, smell it. His mouth twitched slightly. The instincts of a predator awakened inside him. He gritted his teeth, pressing his hand against the wall as if bracing against a wave. For the first time in his long life, Winter understood what it meant to crave without permission. Back in the hunter's cabin, bang, bang, bang. The door shook under a fist that clearly didn't care for manners. "Eldor, open up." Eldor stepped forward, unbothered, and unlatched the heavy iron bolt. The door creaked wide, revealing 3 figures. Villagers, ragged and shivering from the snow. "He struck again," one said, breathless.
"You promised us you'd rid us of this monster. You said you'd kill that foul vampire."
The mayor's daughter this time. Ripped the roof straight off, left nothing but blood and ice. "You promised us. We paid for your skill, your strength. You were the one who claimed to know these creatures." "You told us you could end it," said another, older man. "So where were you last night?" Eldor looked past them, toward the horizon. The mountain where the castle stood, old stone hidden by storm, seemed to breathe with shadows. "He's learning," Eldor said softly, "becoming what he always feared." He stepped back, gathering his coat and sword. As he passed the villagers, he added, "Tell your dead to wait. This ends soon." And with that, he vanished into the snow. Chapter 3. The Mind and the Hunger. The candle flickered. Somewhere deep within the crumbling citadel of Blackridge Hollow, Winter sat motionless atop a throne of stone. The wind moaned through shattered stained glass, but he did not stir. He was starving. The hunger tore at his core like a splintered blade, twisting through every nerve, whispering, "Feed, feed, feed." It was not pain in the traditional sense. Pain could be compartmentalized, flinched from, ignored. This was different. This was a command. He closed his eyes. His breathing was slow, measured, unnatural for something that no longer needed breath. "I wonder," he said aloud, his voice steady, "if I can still analyze within reality's playground." He smiled faintly, then leaned forward and began to think. He disassembled the hunger, not with emotion, not with resistance, but with the mind. What was hunger but a signal, a call to action, a warning system designed to preserve the self by compelling the body to act, irrationally if needed, in order to survive. But survival for what? The vampire hunger was different from human need. This was not the body's call for calories, nor thirst for hydration. This was an impulse without purpose. It demanded he destroy, consume, degrade. And for what? There was no furthering of self, no elevation, no purpose served, only submission. Winter's eyes narrowed. A being without needs is a being without values, but a being whose only need is destruction has no self at all. He stood now, rising from the throne, and the hunger howled. It clawed at his ribs. His gums ached. His eyes pulsed red. But still, he did not move, not toward the villagers hiding in terror, not toward the frightened deer outside the broken portcullis. Instead, he began walking, slowly, purposefully, towards the upper chamber, where a long, broken mirror stood, and he stared. There was no reflection, but he imagined what they saw. A creature, inhuman, cold, predatory. But that was not what he saw. He saw only himself, The man who had faced down armies, outwitted gods, and defeated death itself, not with strength, but with clarity. The body is meat. The thirst is a whisper. But the mind is who I am. He tilted his head, and with pure, deliberate intent, he filed the hunger away. He placed it in a box within the cathedral of his mind and closed the lid. It still screamed, but now it was behind glass, and he no longer listened. As he walked the castle halls, snow drifting in through shattered archways, Winter spoke softly to himself. They won't listen.
They won't listen. I could reason with them in another world. But here, in this reality...
Not this time. They never do. He remembered the villagers, the mob, the torches. Even when he'd saved them in the previous trial, they'd turned. Elder, he must be the hunter now, he said aloud, without judgment. Reality seeks balance. If I am the monster, then he must be the one sent to slay me. He paused. It will not be enough for me to resist. I will be tested, not only in will, but in power. He will come prepared, as I would have. He stepped out onto the castle's ruined balcony, cloak billowing in the wind. Beneath him, the forest stretched wide, blanketed in moonlight and cold silence. Somewhere out there, the hunter waited. Winter's eyes glowed faintly, then dimmed. The greatest power is not strength, he whispered, but the knowledge of how to use it and when not to. A beat. I will not fall to instinct. I am not a slave to design. I am the architect of self. As he turned and descended into the catacombs, the whisper of the hunger remained, but it was no longer a master. It was a passenger, and soon he would face Elder, but he would do so not as a beast, not even as a man, but as Winter, the mind within the monster. Chapter 4. The Climb Within. The snow crunched beneath his boots like old bones cracking. Elder moved up the winding path alone, the cold wind slapping against his cloak like a memory he refused to bury. The sky above was bruised with twilight. The castle loomed ahead, jagged and silhouetted against a frozen world that seemed to hold its breath. And yet, he smiled, even laughed. Now you'll know, he muttered under his breath. Now you'll finally understand. He grinned wider, though not with cruelty. It was something else, something deeper, almost satisfied. For too long, Winter had played the role of the untouchable, the rational mind, the voice of clarity in a world choking on shadows. But hunger cared not for logic. Thirst did not reason. It only screamed. And now Winter would hear that scream. Eldor paused, gloved hand resting on a frost-covered tree. He closed his eyes. He remembered the first scream, the first kill, the moment the thirst overtook him, not as a curse, but as a justification. They always see the monster. That's what he used to tell himself. So I'll give them one. There had been no Winter then, no Serana, no Alpha, just Elder, the beast that tore through nations, intent on ending a world that never tried to understand him. But something changed. Not suddenly. No flash of light, no miracle. Only moments, small ones. Winter's refusal to kill, Serana's whispered grief, the Alpha's sacrifice to protect strangers, each moment like a chisel. And slowly the monster began to crack, not die, transform. Elder opened his eyes, looking up at the castle. I used to think power meant being feared, he said softly. Now I know. It means being understood, and still choosing to protect those who cannot understand you. He thought of Winter, pacing behind stone walls now, hungry, wrestling with a voice that knew no logic, only instinct. You used to pity me, didn't you? He smiled again. You saw the blood on my hands and thought I was lost, but you never carried the thirst. You never knew what it meant to wake with nothing but shadows inside. A long exhale. Now you do. He took a few more steps, and something shifted inside him. Not pride, not vengeance, but relief. Relief that this had been the trial, because now they would speak not as predator and prey, not as logic and blood, but as equals. And Elder, the creature once bent on annihilation, now climbed towards someone he once vowed to kill in order to save him. As the castle doors loomed near, Eldur stopped. He looked at his reflection in a sheet of ice frozen to the outer wall. The same face, the same grey hair, the same crimson eyes, but no longer a monster, not to himself. He nodded once and said the words that could only be spoken by a man who had once fallen and now stood. I am not what I've done. I am what I choose next. The door creaked open. The final trial had begun. Chapter 5. The Hunter's Declaration. The ancient door groaned open like a beast in pain. Eldur stepped into the frozen silence of the castle. No torches, no guards, no movement, only dust, cold air, and the echoes of forgotten screams. He stood in the grand entryway, cloak hanging from his shoulders like a storm cloud. Snow melted at his feet, trailing behind him like a ghost. His eyes flared red beneath his long grey hair, sharpened by centuries of experience and honed hatred. Then he screamed, voice booming through the stone like thunder. I know you're here. His fists clenched. Show yourself, vampire. I am your slayer. His boots cracked across the marble floor as he marched forward, each step defying the silence. There is no room you can hide in, no darkness I haven't already crawled through. He threw open a rusted door. Cobwebs clung to his cloak. A broken chandelier lay on the floor like a skeleton.
Show yourself, vampire! I have been watching.
You think I haven't felt the hunger you feel? He spat. I drank it, lived it, defeated it. He moved through the hallway, running a gloved hand along the dusty stone, room by room, chamber by chamber, each one colder than the last, each one older than his memory could name. I know every strength you hold, every weakness that whispers behind your eyes. He pulled aside a thick curtain and kicked open another door. Nothing, just a cold draft and the smell of centuries. Reality gave you fangs. I filed them down to dust. His voice lowered, but not his resolve. There is nothing you can surprise me with. Winter. Far above, in the highest room of the keep, Winter stood in silence. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't preparing. He wasn't afraid. He simply stood by the window, watching the snow fall. The chrome mask covered his face now, reflecting the frost in 1,000 fractured lines. His cloak hung still, untouched by wind. The fire within him had quieted. He wasn't speaking to Eldur, only to the air itself, to the trial, to the shadowed reality that had cast them both in this final game. He's right, Winter said softly. There is no way to win this. He paused, then added with calm certainty, apart from winning. He turned from the window. The pieces were in place. The trial had begun, and Winter, more than anyone, understood what this test truly was. Not a test of blood, but of understanding. Not a test of strength, but of truth. Chapter 6. The Shadow Unleashed. Winter stood at the heart of the castle's great hall. Its columns cracked, banners rotted, and cold light bleeding through shattered stained glass. The fire had long since died, but the air shimmered faintly around him, not from heat, but from him. He had donned the chrome mask. It fit now, not as armor, not as disguise, but as declaration. He turned slowly, his cloak brushing the broken floor tiles, and whispered to no one, For all the times you hounded me, Elder. The words echoed like a spell. It's time to have a little fun. He stepped forward, boots silent. Let's see what this vampiric power can do when given to a mind. Above, the stone ceiling groaned. The shadows pulsed. Winter raised his hand, and the world bent. In objectivist thought, force is a last resort, a violation of reason, of sovereignty. But when used against the man of the mind, force awakens something far worse. Precision, purpose, power with direction. Winter did not lunge. He did not roar. He calculated. And in that calculation, he rewrote the rules. From the darkness around him, he stepped aside, not moved, split. A second Winter peeled from his side like smoke folded in half, identical and calm. Then a third, each reflection exact. Thought made flesh, purpose made mirror. They stood still for a moment, then blinked out of sight. Elder crashed through the eastern door, sword drawn, the sigils around his neck glowing faintly. His boots struck the stones like war drums. His eyes were already glowing. "I know your tricks, Winter," he shouted. "I've been you. I've killed what you've become." A whisper behind him. He turned. Nothing. A whisper to the left. A shadow flickered, then vanished. "I've slain vampire lords, elders, kings," he spat, eyes darting. "There is nothing you can do I haven't already defended against." The fire in the hearth exploded. Elder turned just in time to raise his blade, shielding himself from a blast of frost that seared like liquid silver. It coated the wall in an instant, runic defenses glowing dimmer now. Overrun. Winter appeared in the flames, unmoving. "You're right," he said. "You've prepared for the monster." He stepped forward. "But you never prepared for me." He vanished again. From the left, a blow. From the right, another. From above, a third Winter dropped from the ceiling like liquid shadow, striking Elder's shoulder with a crack of force. Before dissolving, Elder staggered back, snarled, raised his hand, and unleashed light. A holy beam erupted, melting shadows and forcing all illusions to retreat. The true Winter emerged from the far wall, unscathed, still walking. "You think this trial is about strength, but you missed the point." Winter's voice rang clear, not angry, but amused. "It was never about whether you could defeat a vampire." He raised one finger, and the room bent sideways as if reality itself took a breath. "It's about whether you could face a man who does not rely on fangs or fear." The walls turned black. The ceiling faded to stars. Snow began to fall inside the chamber. "But one who understands." Elder lunged, now silent, now seething. His blade struck Winter's side, only to pass through. Winter had turned into mist, not like other vampires, not just smoke. This mist clung to Elder, wrapped around his arm, held it, then pushed him backwards, without touch. "I am not a predator. I am not prey. I am Winter." Elder crashed into a pillar, breaking the stone with his back. He growled, rising again, sigils glowing, but his breath was ragged now. His sword was no longer steady. He stared at the chrome mask, the mind behind the monster. The room held still. Winter didn't strike. He waited for Elder to see, to understand, and in that pause, something deeper settled. Not victory, but revelation. Winter's voice echoed once more. "This is not a contest of strength. It's a mirror, and you're not ready to see your reflection." Chapter 6. The true power. Elder crashed through the castle's final chamber doors, roaring with fury. The ancient stone groaned under his boots as he strode into the great hall. Cobwebs, frost, and centuries-old silence shattered by his wrath. "Show yourself, vampire!" His voice was thunder, his rage volcanic. Winter stood calmly in the center of the chamber, cloaked in black, chrome mask gleaming. Snowfall from the broken ceiling fell in slow motion around him. His hands were folded behind his back. Elder's lip curled in fury. "You're cheating," he spat. "You are a vampire, an elder. You should not have these powers. This is unfair." Winter tilted his head slightly, amused. Elder jabbed his sword forward. This isn't you. This is some twisted manipulation of what you are. No vampire should be able to do what you've done." The silence that followed was sharp, thick, like the world had drawn breath and held it. Then Winter stepped forward, just once, and spoke. "That's the problem, Elder. You think the curse defines the man." He reached up and tapped the chrome mask. "But I was a man before this, and I remained one after." He began to pace slowly, voice even, deep, deliberate. "Yes, I changed. Yes, the curse wrapped around me like a second skin, but what you never understood," he turned to face Elder directly, "was that the curse doesn't decide who I am. I do." He raised a hand, and a quiet pulse of energy whispered across the room. Not force, but focus. "You were turned, Elder. So was Serana. So was Eldritch. And every one of you let go of who you were. You forgot the man. You let the world, the curse, the expectation rewrite you." Elder lowered his blade slightly, confused. Winter continued, voice firmer now. "When I was turned, I didn't become a monster. I was given one. But a man is not what happens to him. He is what he chooses to be. In response." He stepped closer. Each word landed like stone against steel. "I retained everything I was before. My logic, my memory, my principles. The change tried to mold me. It told me what I should be. Hungry, violent, cold, cruel." He shook his head. "But I don't care what the world says I should be." He took another step. Elder stood still now, sword forgotten. Too many people spend their lives performing for mirrors, trying to please others, to be liked, admired, accepted. They forget themselves. They become masks, costumes. He touched the chrome mask gently. "This mask I wear, it isn't to hide. It's to remind me. When I look into a mirror, I don't see myself. I see what the world has tried to make me. 1,000 versions colliding in the glass. But I kept the one truth sacred." He paused. "The truth of who I am." The chamber darkened, not in malice, but in weight. Snow swirled around him now like mist. "You think this is cheating? This is discipline. This is focus. This is the mind unchained. There is no curse greater than forgetting who you truly are." He turned his back to Elder. "And no power greater than remembering." Elder stood frozen, breathing hard, but no longer in anger. He felt it now, not defeat, but awakening. The entire trial, the entire battle. The roles reversed was not about testing strength or powers. It was to show them the most dangerous truth. That man is not bound by what others think he should be. Not by the curse, not by the crowd, not even by himself, when he was weak. Winter stopped, standing before the altar of the old gods. He placed one hand on it, spoke without turning. "This challenge was never about winning. It was about remembering." Chapter 7. The sun that burns nothing. The castle was silent. Dust floated in the air like slow-motion snow. The tension had drained. The combat ended. Not in blood, but in revelation. Winter stood still beneath the great domed ceiling, his chrome mask reflecting the pale light. Elder stood across from him, blade lowered, confusion creasing his brow. Then Winter spoke. Neither of us won. He turned away, walking toward the arched hallway that led deeper into the ancient ruin. We've simply opened our eyes. Eldor followed, silent. But, Winter said, his voice colder now, more precise. There must be a victory. He placed one gloved hand on the rusted iron of the castle's double doors. And so, I will claim this one. With that, he pulled them open. Sunlight. Real, pure, morning gold. It spilled across the stone floor like a flood. Dust in its path shimmered. Heat kissed the old stones for the first time in 1,000 years. Winter stepped forward. Eldor's hand shot out instinctively. No, you'll burn. But Winter kept walking. He passed the threshold. The light touched him. Smoke began to rise. He staggered. And then he didn't. The smoke stopped. The skin did not blister. His cloak did not catch. The light wrapped around him and held. Eldor stared wide-eyed, his mouth half open. How is that even possible? Winter turned his head slightly. His voice was calm, measured. You already know why the light burns us, Eldor. We are not merely flesh. We are shadow, given shape. We are darkness, bound by hunger. He turned to face the rising sun. And light, real light, infrared, ultraviolet, electromagnetic fields, does not burn our skin. It dissolves the nature of our being. Eldor stepped forward, eyes narrowing. Winter continued. We are made of the dark, not metaphorically. Actually, our curse is more than mystical. It is a molecular encoding, a metaphysical tether to Nocturna's plane of hunger and memory. He raised his hand into the sunbeam. That light does not destroy the body. It destroys the shadow core we are built from, because where there is light... He turned. There can be no shadow. Eldor nodded slowly. Yes, that's why the curse works. The sun unravels what we are, what Nocturna made us. Winter took a breath. Exactly. He stepped back inside, closing the door. A faint singe on his cloak was the only mark of the light. Then he turned his masked face to Eldor. But I am not what Nocturna made. I am who I chose to remain. They stood now not in the ancient castle, but back in Eldor's sanctuary. The trial was over. The realm of reality's test dissolved, and Eldor stared at him not with anger, but with something older. Respect. How? Eldor asked again. Winter walked to the hearth. The fire was low, the coals still red. I analyzed the fields of sunlight, he said, picking up a piece of chalk. He drew on the stone wall. Waveforms, light frequencies, molecular patterns. Infrared penetrates. Ultraviolet excites. But the key is the harmonic interference with our core frequency. He circled a spot. Shadow stuff exists on the negative energy spectrum, a field we cannot even detect in normal science, but it reacts to certain light patterns. He turned. So I did what I always do. He tapped his head. I reprogrammed myself. I rewrote the vibrational anchor of my form. My mind told my essence. This is no longer shadow. This is me. Eldor sat down slowly. Winter knelt beside the hearth, eyes gleaming behind the mask. Nocturna gave us a curse, but he cannot erase the spark of volition, the will to define self. He stood. The curse is the same as the world's expectations, Eldor. It tells you what you should be, what you must be. But man is not made to serve another's vision. He is not meant to be shaped by fear, or by hunger, or by dark gods. He is meant to choose. Eldor said nothing. Then slowly he stood, and he bowed his head. You win. Not because of your powers, but because you remembered what most of us forgot. Winter nodded. He walked towards the shadow of the room, and let the light from the fire dance across his mask. The man who remembers who he is cannot be defeated. Epilogue. The fire in the sanctuary. The storm had passed. Not just the clash of powers or philosophies, but the inner battles. Each of them had wrestled for too long. Inside the sanctuary, warmth flickered. A hearth blazed with orange light, casting dancing shadows across ancient stone walls. The long wooden table was cluttered with goblets, ancient maps, and scrolls now meaningless. The kind of mess made only by people who had finally earned the right to stop fighting. Sorana sat near the fire, draped in black, sipping something red and ceremonial. Her expression was soft, amused, but always watching. The Alpha lay stretched beside the hearth, a hulking presence of fur and breath, golden eyes half-lidded, his massive chest rising and falling in slow, peaceful rhythm. He did not speak, he never did, but the room seemed safer simply because he was there. Winter stood by the window, the chrome mask catching the low light. He said nothing, his eyes fixed on the endless snowscape beyond, but he listened. He always listened. Then, Elder stood, the chair scraped back on stone. He lifted his goblet and cleared his throat with theatrical precision. "Let it be known," he began, gesturing grandly, "that I once beat the most powerful being in existence." He turned, finger extended toward Winter. "Yes, you. Don't act surprised. You remember it, don't you?" Winter tilted his head slightly, saying nothing. Eldor carried on. "The first challenge, the battle, the blood, and I won. Me, Elder, the very same vampire who once sought to annihilate mankind, now reformed, refined, and undefeated in round one." Sorana arched an eyebrow. "Refined is a strong word." Winter finally spoke. "So is undefeated." "Oh, don't get pedantic with me." Elder grinned. "That one win counts, and by my count, that puts me on equal footing with a being who once made gods tremble just by thinking." Sorana sipped her drink again. "Well, if we're measuring wins by quantity over quality..." The Alpha gave a slow huff of air. Not quite a growl, not quite a laugh, but definitely something. Elder raised his goblet higher. "Mock me if you must, but history shall record this moment. And when it does, let the bards sing. Elder, slayer of armies, breaker of chains, and victor of challenge won." Winter turned from the window. The mask glinted. "I'll be sure to carve it into the wall myself." They chuckled. Even Sorana smiled. And for that moment, there were no curses, no gods, no destinies. Only friends, damned, divine or redeemed, gathered by a fire that no shadow dared cross. End. Hey, it's me, Professor Shadow. If you made it this far, you're one of the few. Don't forget to subscribe, because nearly 80% of those who pass through the darkness never stay. And that's okay. Not everyone can handle what dwells in the shadows, but if you can, if you want more, then subscribe and help keep the shadows alive.